This is the Power PU Virtuoso build for WvW Roaming. It's got a lot of burst damage, but also has pretty decent survivability through aegis generation, misdirection, and through the stealth that you gain from the chaos trait line. So let's just get straight into the build. I take Berserker's gear on my armor and my weapons, and I take the dragon stats on my trinkets. So that'll get you to around 45-ish crit chance, which is going to be modified later on by the traits, so we'll talk about that later, but generally that's the number you want to get to if you're going to run a different combination of stats. Then I take the Fireworks runes, which give you your movement speed, and the Fury uptime, which is also really important to the build. On the weapons I take the Sword Torch. This is kind of like your defensive set. It's got energy and cleansing on it, and you've got mobility with the sword, and you've got stealth with the torch. So it's very defensive set, but also is potentially aggressive because the mobility also allows you to chase targets. And then you've got the scepter and the focus, which is your more aggressive set. So I take cleansing and air sigil on that one. You could also take a pistol instead of the focus if you wanted more single target, but I felt that the focus was a lot better because you have more utility, and the way that Virtuoso's burst works is it's a little bit delayed, so it works out with the CC of the focus better because the focus has a delay on it as well that allows you to kind of like precast it into your burst. So I prefer the focus. In illusions, you'll be taking Shatterstorm to give you more ammo on your F1, which is your main damaging ability. You're going to gain clones, or essentially blades, whenever you gain stealth, and you've got a decent amount of stealth access on this build, and that's going to help you to gain enough blades to do higher bursts because you gain most of your blades through blocking or dodging, but that gives you like 3 blades. So what you can do is you can block something, you can go in stealth, and then you can create a clone, and then that'll give you your 5 blades to do your burst. So it kind of works out pretty well. And then you've got shatter skill reduction, which is really important because your shadows are your damage. And then finally you have Master of Fragmentation, which increases the crit chance of your bladesong harmony, your main damaging ability, by 25%. So that's going to be really important as well, because combined with the quiet intensity trait, which gives you 30% crit chance on Fury instead of 20%, that gets you to 100% crit chance about on your bladesong harmonies, which really increases your burst damage. So it's really important. Then in Chaos, you're going to be taking Master of Manipulation, which reduces the cooldown on manipulations. The Blink skill is a manipulation, which is one of the strongest skills for Mesmer. It's a long-range teleport, which is also a stun break, and now that's a 28-second cooldown. So that's a very powerful skill to be reducing the cooldown of, and since it's such a low cooldown, it's going to be up very often. And also, Mass Invisibility, which gives you a lot of stealth, is going to be a 60-second cooldown because of the reduction there. And it's going to also give you a little bit of super speed after you use those skills, which can be nice. And then you're going to be taking Auspicious Anguish, which will convert damaging conditions to boons whenever you gain distortion or are disabled with no internal cooldown. So if you're facing someone who's doing a lot of CC and conditions, then you're going to be enjoying all these boons that they're giving you for free and cleansing. And also you've got 1 distortion as well with the Blade Renewal. If you really needed to survive conditions, the distortion is already good there, but it'll also cleanse those conditions. So this is really important to your cleansing, and can also give you aegis if you convert burning into aegis, which is really important for this build because you want to be blocking a lot. And then you will take Prismatic Understanding, which increases the stealth durations that you have by 50%. So Mass Invis is usually 6 seconds, now it's 9. And 9 is usually long enough for you to get out of combat and disengage. And it also gives you boons while you're in stealth, and one of those boons is aegis. So you've got a lot of aegis through the chaos trait line, which is important for the psychic riposte and the other traits in Virtuoso. You have Blade Turn Refrain, which gives you aegis whenever you use a blade song, so that's even more blocking. and then you're going to be getting damage modifiers whenever you use a blade, because it'll give you vulnerability when those blades crit, and it will also give you that deadly blades modifier. You'll also be taking Duelist's Reversal, which gives you quickness, fury, and regeneration. The fury time is really important, and the quickness is kind of nice because you can actually auto attack with your sword, and it just allows you to counter attack much faster. And the internal cooldown is 3 seconds on this, so you're going to have your fury uptime very reliably, and you can have quickness very often. Then, as I've said before, the fury is going to be increased here, and you're going to gain extra ferocity based on your vitality, which is why the dragon stats are really nice, because it allows you to still have the vitality that you want to survive, but have similar levels of burst to the just full berserker stats. And then you've got Psychic Riposte, which gives you 3 blades whenever you block or dodge an attack. So we've got a lot of evades on this build. On every weapon set, you've got a evade on the sword, you've got a block on the scepter, you've got aegis whenever you shatter or use a bladesong, and then you've got aegis from converting boons out of fire or the burning condition. Also from just going in stealth, you'll get aegis. So there's a lot of ways for you to block and just interact with enemies by having that sustain you need, rather than just being a perma-stealth trying to one-shot people. As a Virtuoso, you will no longer have access to clones. Instead, you will get blades. And blades are not specific to a target anymore, so it's easier to change targets with your shatters, but you don't have the constant pressure of the clone, so it's a trade-off. But clones are kind of necessary to some weapon skills. Like on the Greatsword 2, you create a clone when you hit a target, and then it bounces between the clone and the enemy to do more damage. But since you don't have the clone, you have to be in melee range, and this is a range kind of archetype, so I don't really suggest using the Greatsword on Virtuoso. But with the Sword 3, you can't swap between the clone as well, so they've reworked it to be Blade Leap, which you will now just leap in any direction that you're targeting, and it will do a decent amount of damage, and will also give you a blade if it lands, and then you can port back to the original location. And that's useful for making plays that are like unpredictable bursts, where you can leap away from your enemy and they chase you, but then you come back with the precasted burst. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do with it. You can go in melee and then port back out to do your ranged abilities. So I really like the Sword 3. You can also do like juke plays where you get chased by someone and then you port back behind them and then change direction. So yeah, it's really nice. So the sword skills, the auto attack is pretty good damage, because when you have quickness, which you'll get often, you can land that 3rd strike, which will do a lot of damage if the target has no boons. The 2 skill is just an evade, which will do a little bit of damage. And the Torch 4 is going to give you stealth and blind nearby enemies. Does a little bit of power damage at the end of it, but not too important. So you want to be using that to escape. You've got a 4.5 second stealth because of Prismatic Understanding, and it's also a combo finisher blast. Phantasmal Mage actually does a decent amount of damage for a power build, because the base stats are pretty high there, and it will daze and give a little bit of confusion and burning. You mostly just want to throw this out whenever you're in stealth to make the enemy think that you're coming at them, and then when you bait their dodges from the Phantasmal Mage coming at them, then you can land your real burst. So the Scepter and Focus is your main damaging weapon set. It will give out clones, which will give you blades whenever you hit with the 3rd auto chain. And then the Scepter 2 is a really good counter attack. It'll block 1 attack and then evade afterwards, so it's good against multi-hitting attacks as well. And then you want to target the target that you want to do damage to, not necessarily the one that you're blocking the attack from, because then you'll deal damage to the specific target and it'll redirect that riposte. And The Scepter 3 also does pretty good damage because it has a high power coefficient, even though this is normally thought of as a Condi weapon. So really good power burst on the Scepter, even though it's a ranged and kind of safe and sustainable weapon. Then the Focus is pretty interesting because it has the Phantasm, which actually does a lot of damage if all of the hits land, but they're kind of not reliable. However, it will block projectiles and give vulnerability to the target, which increases your damage. And the Focus 4 will help you land it. So the Focus 4 gives a curtain out, and the temporal curtain will cripple enemies that pass through it. And then you can activate it again to pull enemies into the middle area of that curtain. The second part of that curtain cast is no cast time. So you can cast it and then precast all of your other burst abilities into it. So I can use Temporal Curtain, then I can use Phantasmal Warden and Confusing Images, and while the Confusing Images is winding up, I'll pull them into all of that damage, so it'll look like this. And the 3, and then pull them in, and then all of those hits are happening. You can also use your Shatters as well into that. Your F1 is your main Shatter, because it's the power coefficient and has increased crit chance and has 2 ammo on it. But the F2 does a little bit of damage too, and will also give cripple to the target. So you can be using that to catch up to enemies if they're, running away from you. It'll give a little bit of cripple. And then the F3 does a decent amount of damage, but it doesn't scale with the number of blades you have. So you can use that with one blade and it'll do okay amount of damage, but it'll do more days duration the more blades you have, and it's an AoE because of the illusionary Grandmaster. Now Blade Turn Requiem is kind of like the F3 in that it doesn't scale too well with the number of blades you have. It will block for 3 seconds when you have even one blade up, so generally I like to use it with one blade, and then it scales with the number of blades. It does this attack around you, which does very minor damage. So I don't have any real things that will scale with that. Like if I was playing a Condi build, it would do Torment, but it doesn't really do much on the power build. So you just want to do it with one blade. So the F1 you want to use with 5 blades. The F2 you could use with 5 blades as well. And then when you are kind of like on cooldown with those, you want to just use 1 or 2 blades with the F3. You have to be facing your target when you use your Shatter, but you can immediately start looking away. So what I like to do a lot of times is I will be kiting or whatever, and I'll turn around using my mouse really quickly, and then I'll cast the Shatter, and then I will about face and then keep kiting, and the Shatter will go towards them, and then you can keep kiting while that's hitting them from behind, essentially. And that's the main way that you want to be using these Shatters, because you do need to kite often. The build does have good sustain, but it's not a tanky build. Like in a 1v1 or you're in an outnumbered situation where you need to play a little bit more passively, you want to be using those Shatters more with the kiting movement. But if you're playing very aggressively, you can also do the plays where you go in with the Sword 3 and then use your Shatter in there. And then once you use your Shatter, you can port back out with the Sword 3 return. And also you have Blink, which you can enable a lot of your damage combos with as well. Either Feast, your heal skill, will heal you based on how many blades you have. So you always want to use that with maximum blades to get like a 9,000 heal. Signet of Midnight is just more stealth and blind, and Blink is just your disengage or movement ability, which is a stun break, really low cooldown, great for making plays or for disengaging. Mass Invisibility though is a 10 target stealth for 9 seconds. It's great for peeling for your allies, and for example, if they're in the down state, you can res them without the enemy seeing that you're doing it. And it's just great utility for your team, even though this is a otherwise kind of selfish build. While the build does rely on stealth, and stealth can interfere with your blade generation because you need to be targeted to be able to block or evade something, You still have decent amount of generation through your stealth is just going to give you blades. You're also going to get blade renewal, which you can use aggressively, or just time it in between your F1 bursts, or when you know that you can't dodge something anytime soon, then you use blade renewal to fill in that gap. And then you can just use your double burst of your F1 and your scepter and focus. You don't want to be overlapping those two though, because generally that's most of your damage right there is your F1 and then your scepter focus burst. So I like to space those out to bait out cooldowns, because you don't want to, lose all of your cooldowns in one go. So I like to do, for example, I'll go into a fight, I'll maybe dodge or block one attack, and then I'll use my F1, and then I will swap to my scepter and focus. I'll use the burst with the pull, and then by then I've blocked or dodged another attack with my scepter 2 or one of my aegis, and then I'll use my F1 again, and that kind of spaces out the cooldowns as well. And also, you have plenty of stealth, so if you want to just use stealth to hide your animations to burst the target, you can reliably land it without them knowing when to dodge. So that's kind of how you want to be playing the Power PU Virtuoso. If you like this content, then like the video, subscribe for more, and leave a comment down below what you think about the build, and leave your account name as well in your message, and I will give out one community chest. With that being said, I will see you all next time.